So again, for all of you, just a reminder, my name is Kim Graziani. I'm with the Center for Community Progress. And I don't know if I was clear in my opening remarks, but my role with the Center for Community Progress is I get to be the lucky one that takes all of the calls from people across the country who are interested in getting some answers and or to work with our organization. So I sort of listen to people, sort of what their needs are. I assemble the right teams, hopefully usually they're the right teams, within our organization, and then sort of deploy that resource and technical assistance out to communities across the country. So it is my pleasure to moderate this panel. And really the focus of our discussion today is, again, to reflect back on what you've already heard and to really apply that to the Pennsylvania context. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to have each of our panelists introduce themselves. Hopefully keep it to about 3 minutes apiece of who you are, what are your experiences in Pennsylvania, and what your astrological sign is. Just kidding. Okay, it's my pleasure. John Cromer.
John Cromer, Pisces. I'm a consultant. Prior to doing consulting work, I was Director of Housing and Community Development for the City of Philadelphia during the 1990s. During the past 10 plus years, I've worked primarily with city governments and urban institutions on strategic planning and policy development for disinvested cities that have problems with vacant properties and tax delinquent properties and a vanishing middle class, and that have to make difficult decisions about how to use the very limited resources available to address priorities and get something done. I've spent a lot of time recently in the city of Reading, which is an Act 47 city. I drafted the Act 47 Housing and Economic Development Strategies, and I'm working there on some implementation tasks.
Great. Thanks, John. Irene McLaughlin?
Yes, I'm Irene McLaughlin. I'm an attorney and mediator from the Pittsburgh region. And I'm also known as the formerly honorable, as I was a city magistrate for a 10-year term. Working on dishonorable. No. So I did for 10 years sit in housing court, what was known as housing court, and that was the venue for code enforcement in the city of Pittsburgh. So it's where I got a great appreciation for the challenge of blighted properties and getting code compliance. I've continued, that was up till 2003, on various projects to acquire, remediate, and reclaim and transfer out blighted properties in Beaver County, a tax claim district, using Retzel, and more recently have been doing a lot of work with the Housing Alliance, consulting to local communities on their efforts to reclaim abandoned properties and blighted properties. I work in the Homewood section of Pittsburgh, very, very disinvested neighborhood in the city of Pittsburgh. Currently working with the Tri-Cog initiative, Blight Initiative in Armand Valley, and Lewis is here, director of the Steel Valley COG, trying to look at that multi-municipal land bank opportunity in this new law. And I also have a special place in my heart for lower income homeowners, and I run a clinic on helping low-income homeowners get title to their properties where they are an heir and they have a claim, but they can't afford an attorney to go through estate administration. And as I mentioned before, you don't have to open an estate because of Section 301 of our Probate Estates and Fiduciaries Code that says that title does transfer at death to heirs, if you didn't hear that before.
Chris Galata?
Yeah, I'm Chris Galata. I see a lot of familiar faces in the audience. I've been doing a lot of training around the state the past few years as a consultant on the issue of blight and tools to address blight. Prior to that, I was the executive director of the Redevelopment Authority of Cumberland County. Just to orient you, Carlisle's the county seat in Cumberland County. And I think the issue of blight obviously is of interest to everybody in this room, certainly, but it's really an issue that is of interest throughout Pennsylvania. And I think thanks to the good work of the Housing Alliance, maybe a good problem to have now is what's the best tool to address blight. So I think we've come a long way, baby.
Great. Well, thank you. As you can tell, the panelists at this table represent a geographically diverse picture of Pennsylvania and obviously come at this issue with a very different lens. So what we're going to do for the next hour and 5 minutes is going to spend about half to three-quarters of our time in sort of a moderated discussion, again, with the whole purpose to get the panelists' perspectives on how land banking might play out in Pennsylvania communities. And then, of course, since we're not all about social engineering, we are going to open it up and have you all have the opportunity to really ask these questions, whatever questions you might have for these panelists, and have a discussion. And then we're going to eat really good food and not fall asleep after lunch and stay engaged. So with that, I would love to start off with asking each of the panelists, what do you think are the most common problems that Pennsylvania communities are facing in terms of vacant, abandoned, tax delinquent, foreclosed properties?
Well, it's, this probably isn't the answer that you might come up with, but I think it's worth thinking about. I often think about something that a member of Reading's city council has said repeatedly, and that is this city should be very marketable. And I think that's really true of the communities that we care about. They're really very marketable. They have a lot of green space, like what you see out the window. They have a sensible layout. The street grid makes sense. They're near a river or a park or a forest or woodlands or a rural community or farms. They have appealing older housing at a variety of prices and are generally affordable. Hopefully the downtown wasn't ruined during the urban renewal period, and there's some downtown fabric that makes sense. The real problem, a real problem for all these places is the proliferation of blighted properties. That one property on a block brings down the block. You're aware of this problem, and I think what's more troubling to people who are looking at communities like the ones we're concerned about from the outside is there doesn't seem to be a plan. It seems to be getting worse and worse, and nobody seems to be taking charge of this. And so I think that's really the underlying issue that should be considered in thinking about a land bank and thinking about, case by case, how to deal with these properties. Because once you have a plan, once you have a structure and can talk to the public and to prospective homeowners and business owners and investors about it, even if you're not going to be able to do everything in the first 5 years, which you're probably not going to, the idea that there's a plan and something is getting done every year really, I think, puts you on the high ground. And that's, I think, the core problem that we should be focusing on.
By a show of hands, how many people in the room can relate to excess inventory of substandard properties, blighted properties, and or your local jurisdictions don't have a coordinated strategic plan for how to deal with them? By a show of hands. Okay, pretty good, John. No pressure, Irene.
I gotta follow that. Can people hear me without me like leaning down?
Microphone there. If you want
Oh.
it. There's a wireless. The handle. Yes. So everyone can have their.
Hey, now you can hear me, huh? And I don't have to like perch down. I would say common problem is just such frustration. People get so frustrated in trying to deal, giving best efforts to get a handle on this vacant property problem. And it seems like it should be able to be dealt with, and then it becomes mired down in all the kind of details that you're starting to, or are very familiar with now. And that frustration is also coupled with a great deal of mistrust when it comes to land and real estate, and wanting to plan for how we can really repurpose and reclaim and change market within a particular area. There's just tremendous mistrust, and land banking really does require that people start working together who have never worked together before.
Again, you know where I'm going to go with this. Show of hands, how many people in the past 3 months have experienced frustration or mistrust in, wait, let me finish. In your personal, no, I'm just kidding. In your professional lives touching these properties, how many people have experienced those two things? Okay, well, that's not bad. Chris?
Yeah, I'll pick up, I think, on some points that Irene and John made. The first point, I think, relates to the strategic planning, and it's pretty basic, but I think it's an important point that you really need to document the extent of, and the nature of the problem before you start trying to address the problem. And I think in our culture, there's a kind of a knee-jerk reaction when we see it, whether it's blighted property, tax delinquent property, vacant property, property that has been foreclosed upon by a lender, to kind of take a knee-jerk reaction and address the particulars of that property. And that's particularly true in smaller communities. And I work mainly in smaller communities during my time at the Cumberland County Redevelopment Authority. And I think there really is an advantage to the strategic approach that John talked about. First of all, taking time to document the nature and extent of the problem, which is really a planning exercise more than anything else. Getting the information, mapping the information, looking at the concentration of vacant properties, looking at the concentration of blighted properties, looking at the concentration of tax delinquent and properties that have been foreclosed upon by a lender. And you know, when you begin to map it visually, you begin to see things that probably you would not have seen if you just jumped in and tried to deal with a particular property or a particular block. So first and foremost, take that time. And I think it's difficult for communities to do that because this is labor-intensive work, addressing blight. It's labor-intensive on the part of staff. It's also expensive in terms of the legal process. So it's work that it's hard to get it done, and even harder to do a good job at it. And it is frustrating. So I'll tap into Irene's comment as well. But again, I think my comment more than anything is the problem I think that communities have in terms of taking quality time to really analyze the nature and extent of the problem.
How many people in the room, if each one of us at the table would go to your respective community, how many people feel comfortable that they could produce a map and a detailed level of analysis on every vacant, abandoned, tax delinquent, substandard property in your respective communities? How many people could do that? Huh.
Congratulations.
Okay, well, yeah, congratulations to those who can. How many people feel that they're on a pathway that they are currently addressing that issue and that need? Okay, good. Okay. So, a land bank can fix that, right? So given these problems, I feel, first of all, let me ask the group, are there any other specific problems, major problems, that we haven't identified already, that you all are facing in your communities in relation to these types of properties? Please.
One issue that came up in our group was if you looked even whether it was across the county to the different municipalities in that county or across the city and its different neighborhoods, is that the capacity to address the challenge of blighted properties is very uneven.
Mm-hmm.
So one possible benefit of an umbrella land bank entity is that you can not totally equalize, but bring closer to equal the capacity across, whether it's neighborhoods or municipalities.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so a land bank could potentially add some additional capacity to this situation. So, Irene, why should a Pennsylvania community establish a land bank, given some of the problems we've discussed?
So again, we know that the land bank may not be something that every community needs to set up. And we started to get into some of the data gathering that needs to be done to decide whether that does make sense. But I would say, as sort of a very broad stroke answer, it seems to me that a land bank is that steward that we never put into the tax sale laws, into the municipal powers to take these properties, especially when they're tax delinquent, There just wasn't, the anticipation of that in the early 1900s when these laws were set up, that there wouldn't be a buyer for that property at a public auction, that the city wasn't going to continue to grow, that the city's properties weren't going to continue to appreciate in value. So I think, in a very general, broad stroke kind of way, you should consider a land bank as that steward that is now available because of current conditions that we're dealing with to deal with this inventory of problem properties.
Chris, why should a Pennsylvania community think about establishing a land bank?
Well, I think there are certain circumstances where some tools are not going to get the job done for you. A conservatorship, great program, came about as a result of the good work of the Housing Alliance, but relatively time-consuming, arguably best used to deal with maybe a half a dozen problem properties, certainly not 25, 30, 40, 50 properties in a community. And I think the other issue is, John touched on this, the market. In a lot of Pennsylvania communities, and this was not so true of Cumberland County where I work, but as a result of doing training throughout the balance of the county, I certainly have learned that there are not strong housing markets in every community in Pennsylvania. A lot of these communities are struggling economically as well, and sometimes the best strategy is to get site control, and I think Frank or someone made the comment about the importance of getting site control. Once you've got the property, then you're in a position to get the job done. Before you get the property, you're just talking. So once you get that property, then depending on what the market conditions are, it may be a situation where you just wait for the market to improve. And honestly, in the housing market in Pennsylvania, just in the last couple of years, we've seen improvements in the housing market that would cause some communities now to look at affordable housing again and developing housing for first-time homebuyers. But to the extent that there's a need to hold that property for an extended period of time, honestly, redevelopment authorities are not well suited for that. Redevelopment authorities are project-oriented. Their goal is really to get a piece of real estate, and they can work hand-in-hand with a land bank, with the land bank eventually conveying them that piece of real estate, but a redevelopment authority may not have the skill sets to maintain a property during an interim use period, which could be merely the property being boarded up or the property being demolished and the lawn being mowed. And in a lot of areas there aren't redevelopment authorities. So I think land banks in those situations where there is a redevelopment authority, their use is particularly strategic in terms of just holding on to real estate for an emerging redevelopment opportunity, maybe not in the next year or two, but maybe 3, 4, 5 years out.
Mm-hmm. So land banks as patient land holders.
Exactly.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
John?
I think even if you're pretty convinced that a land bank authority wouldn't be a great idea, at least not immediately, that it would be a really good idea to use the enabling legislation and events like this as a basis for discussion about the working relationships between local communities and the county in particular, because there might be some opportunities to strengthen those working relationships in ways that make sense, and perhaps that would actually lead to the creation of a land bank authority. And there are a couple of things I have in mind. In Berks County, I was telling my group, I looked at the last 4 free and clear sales. These are the judicial sales after which you get you get clear title to a property. In the last 2 years, 4 judicial sales, a third to a half of the properties had no bids. Nobody bought them. And so those properties stay in limbo. The owners weren't paying taxes on them, so guess what? They probably weren't also maintaining them per the codes. So those properties are a problem for the Tax Claim Bureau. It doesn't want to have to deal with them in the future. They'll go onto a repository sale list, and there may or may not be a response to that. But it's your future code enforcement problem. That list is the future of your code enforcement agenda. So there may be a mutual interest between a local entity, a municipality, and the county in trying to find a systematic way of dealing with those unwanted properties, and to sort of begin to talk about mutual benefit. And perhaps finding some funding for an authority which is going to deal with these unwanted properties, so that the other properties can be marketed successfully and everybody can win.
Could I jump on that, please? Yeah, and John did emphasize that potential partnership between local government and county government. I just wanted to also extend that to I had neglected to say that I had a lovely 2 years of working in the city of Pittsburgh to really support the efforts of the Ravenstall administration's efforts to really grab a handle on this and do all the strategic planning that we're talking about. And what was really interesting that came out of that was that within the city of Pittsburgh, we started to really identify what are all of the activities that currently take place that would be a part of this land banking system. So it was really starting to look at the line item budgets for the Department of Finance and the Real Estate Division that actually does the processing of the tax delinquent accounts. The law department that would do the research and the actions to quiet title, the URA, which was playing a role in holding on to properties for specific projects. Some of the different budget items in various departments, like the Department of Public Works, to actually go out and maintain properties, the boarding division, which was held somewhere else within the finance department that I never understood. So it was really starting to actually see how even within a municipality, there are all these disparate departments that all actually contribute to what those functions of land banking are. And then to see that there is this like line of business, and even without land banking authority, what kind of benefits and cost efficiencies would be gained if we actually did the work in a really coordinated way that sort of, went from what is this very separate, disparate notion that we just process tax delinquent properties, but thought through to what is the end purpose and the end result of that process in terms of what would happen with this property. And so it involved the planning department, our wonderful planning department that had started to do all kinds of open space planning. So just wanted to, that there is the opportunity for a lot of relationship building and coordination even within a municipality.
I think it's a crucial point. For any of the folks in the room who are starting to have these discussions, who haven't had the experience of getting so many different people within your jurisdiction together to talk about this, have fun. It's going to be an exciting journey. But what I encourage you all to do, and you've already heard from Irene some of the key players, from planning, redevelopment, to public works, to code enforcement, to city solicitors, as in my group. Has anyone actually had a discussion with city solicitors in a group of people who are non-solicitors or attorneys versus having them in a room by themselves? Has anyone seen a difference in that? There's almost a different language that emerges. And I think when you start to have these discussions within your actual jurisdictions, the importance of having separate discussions with people and not always having everyone be locked in a room together and thinking that everyone's going to agree on it, because everyone's agendas are different, right? And people really do like to maintain their little own silo and control, right? So that's within the jurisdiction itself. Who are some other partners? If folks in the room are really interested in exploring land banking, we kind of know who to get from our respective city, municipal, county departments. Who are some other partners that we need to have be part of this discussion?
Let me just make a comment on your previous statement. In thinking about this kind of dialogue, think about her, Liz Hirsch. The Housing Alliance is planning some follow-ups to this, but there, I expect, will be opportunities for someone from the Housing Alliance or for the Housing Alliance to organize some kind of forum or discussion in the place that you're concerned about. And I'm sure you all know the situation in which you've been recommending or proposing something for years, and then there's an event and this lady from Pittsburgh says exactly the same thing, and everyone's standing ovation. So that can help, I think, as a catalyst. But I think the county government relationship is critical. And what is interesting about this issue is that it's a bipartisan issue. It's not a Republican issue or Democratic issue. Everybody's against blight. Everybody is in favor of blight removal. And frequently the arguments are along lines of demolition versus preservation and market rate versus affordable. But no one likes blight. Nobody's opposed to blight removal. And so I think thinking about the county administration, the chief operating officer, and the county commissioners, and thinking about some communication with them. Possibly if there's a community foundation or some local resource or an institution that could help facilitate that dialogue, that's not a bad place to start. You've got to also think about the taxing authorities, because they may or may not be thrilled with the idea that your land bank authority is going to discharge their liens, and they're going to have to buy into that. So, the school district, the water authority, the county, the city, whatever, just having that dialogue about, is there a trade-off? Is there an opportunity for us to acquire a certain amount of properties and discharge the liens so that we can improve the market in a way that will benefit us all. And I